while the power will fall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. We're kicking the new year off in style with one of our favorite guests, and I think as it is an election year, we're going to have him on monthly if his busy schedule can swing it. Mr. Charles Pierce is the author of 4 books. His last one, highly recommend. It's called Idiot America, and he's been a working journalist since 1976. He lives near Boston and has 3 children, and also writes a great blog for Esquire.com. I stumbled on Charlie years ago. I'm not sure exactly how, but when he referred to Paul Ryan from Wisconsin as a zombie-eyed granny starver, I immediately fell in love with his work. Charlie, how are you? Happy New Year.
What's happening, Paul? Happy New Year to you.
Well, we are enjoying the new year. We don't have a lot of snow, but there's still time. And we were gifted with an appearance by our President Joe Biden last week. The government came up with $1 billion to rebuild the John Blotnick Bridge. John Blotnick, of course, was a great Northeast Minnesota DFLer, and they built it in '64, and it's time to put up a new one. So he came to.
That's the one that connects Duluth and Superior, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a beautiful bridge. Okay. You got a nice view of the Lake Superior when you're driving over. And he had his event at Earthrider Brewing, which is owned by a friend of mine. So a fellow named Tim Nelson. So I got a hold of Tim after to congratulate him. And I said, how did it go? He said, great, with the exception of all the emails from the MAGAs out there in Duluth Superior. But, I told him, I said, there used to be a time when a president came to your town, everybody, regardless of their political affiliations, would get out and celebrate, with the exception, of course, of being Dallas, Texas. But we were happy to see him. And, of course, the Pete Stauber, who's the Republican state rep, originally voted against money for that bill, but of course was there when they started delivering the dough. It's funny how that
there's
works.
There's a lot of that going around. The people who voted against the American Recovery Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, who are more than happy to show up and take credit, in front of the locals.
Yeah, every time. It's like clockwork. But I do need to ask you, Charlie, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, Senator Cotton, I declined to answer that question on the grounds that my Irish grandmother will rise from the earth and kill me in my sleep if I do. That was an amazing moment.
Yeah, I mean, are you freaking kidding me? I know
dude, I'm from freaking Singapore. How many times? You want to see my driver's license?
Yeah. Oh my God! It just gets more embarrassing as the days go on. I mean, what's the latest? I read Charlie Pearson, Esquire.com religiously. But what's coming up? What's the next thing you're going to write about? Because there's so much we're going to talk about tonight. But my God!
Well, I'm going to go to Washington next week and sit in on the oral argument in the whether Trump should be on the ballot case.
Interesting.
So that'll be fun. I like going to the Supreme Court. It's like going to temple. I wasn't raised Jewish, but I imagine that going to see the Supreme Court is like going to temple.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'll probably stay down there a couple of days and see what fresh hell is coming out of the House of Representatives. But
I had a friend of mine who became an attorney and actually spoke in front of the Supreme Court. Geez, it must have been 25, 30 years ago. And he was he's a deadhead, proudly wearing his Jerry Garcia tie before the justices.
Well, he doesn't have to worry about any of those stiffs realizing it.
Oh my God. Well, and when you're there, are you going to be able to ask any of the judges, take them on any fishing trips?
No, I don't have. I don't have the checkbook for that. You got to have a couple of bill in the bank to be able to take Sam Alito out to kill some fish.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, I'm a little not as aware as I should have been, but you did a great article on it that I just read yesterday. But tell the people out there in the Wall of Power Radio Land on AM 950 radio about how the whole Dobbs decision came about.
Well, I mean, it was the decision that most of the long march through the judiciary that conservatism took was aimed at overturning, and it was overturned in the case of a women's health clinic in Jackson, Mississippi. But the interesting development this week was that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to hear a challenge to that state's anti-abortion law, which dates back, I'm doing this from memory now, it dates back to 1982. There are abortion restrictions, and they're being challenged now by pro-choice groups. And not only did the Supreme Court accept the case for judgment, which was very much a surprise, but it also there was one of the justices in his supporting concurrence, in his concurrence, absolutely demolished Alito's argument that prevails in the Dobbs case in the United States Supreme Court. Just absolutely destroyed the historical basis for it.
Well, and this whole concept of originalism and the Constitution, let's take a little left turn here and talk about Trump being denied on some of the ballots in some of these states. Now, my fear is that I would just as soon have him be on the ballot in every state and just trounce him at the ballot box. But what's your feeling on the whole thing?
I have, first of all, on the basis of the Constitution, he's disqualified. I mean,
right.
The history of and the plain text of the 14th Amendment leaves no doubt that what he did was an insurrection and that, therefore, he is disqualified from holding any office under the United States.
Right.
Okay, that's not even arguable. As far as the politics of it goes, I'm less inclined to be concerned about the political fallout than I used to be. Because it seems like, a lot of state politicians, secretaries of state, and so forth, are willing to take the flak for it and are waiting for a decision to see if they can.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think if the Supreme Court refuses, declines his argument and points out that, he doesn't have a leg to stand on constitutionally, and allows Colorado to keep him off the ballot and allows Maine to keep him off the ballot, I think you'll see a flood of other states. Michigan has one on the rails already, and I think you will see now. I don't know what happens after that, but I mean, to me, I've always thought, and I don't know the legalities behind this, I always thought a decent compromise was letting him appear on the Republican primary ballot, but not on the state, not on the general election ballot of the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I can see, where you can make an argument that the Republican Party is, has the right to nominate, whoever the hell it wants.
Right.
As long as we can keep that Republican Party from inflicting that person on the rest of us.
The Republican Party. Well, if there is such a thing anymore, right?
Well, it's only a a bag of free floating grievances at this point. But
right.
yeah, there's no consistent Republican Party anymore.
Well,
Not a governing party anyway.
Well, the way I look at it, Charlie, is that we're really an institute in a powerful death penalty. To quote
I've spent 3 weeks. I've spent 3 weeks trying to get that sentence straight in my mind, and I've just given up. It's like the former president there. It's like he's got some kind of spark gap in his head.
Yeah.
You know those spark gaps from the old horror movies where they had the two poles and the electricity goes between them? I think that's the way his brain is functioning now.
Oh, my God. It's, in a strange, perverse way, I give the guy a little credit because he's got to be under incredible pressure, right? I mean, that he can even roll out of the fetal position and get out of bed in the morning.
I have to give his coronary arteries a lot of credit. Let's face it, the guy's in terrible shape, number one, and he is under all that pressure. So,
and I would hate to be a bird on the wall and get a peek into the inner workings of the Donald Melania personal relationship. On top of it, I can't imagine that's a walk in the park.
Well, I think she's very disappointed that I think she's very disappointed in the performance of his coronary arteries. I think she was kind of counting on him, and they've let her down so far.
Maybe she'll end up marrying E. Jean Carroll and finally get the money that Donald promised her.
Oh, I'll tell you what, because I have done so much work for Esquire, I sort of am familiar with E. Jean Carroll, although she was in the generation of Esquire writers like ahead of me. But all I've learned is that he messed with the wrong female writer. This is a smart, savvy, very tough woman.
Yeah. Well, it's.
She wrote a book with Hunter Thompson, for God's sakes.
Really? What book was that?
Hunter. Yeah, you think she's afraid of Donald Trump?
We've got Charlie Pierce out for the whole show, the Wall of Power Radio Hour tonight. We're going to go to commercial and be back with Mr. Pierce in just a few minutes, so don't change the channel. Welcome back to the second set of the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. Our guest for the whole show tonight, and hopefully we make this a monthly thing. We call it Checkpoint Charlie with the esteemed journalist Charles Pierce, who writes for Esquire.com. Charlie, it must have been, now you started writing in 1976. Was that for the Boston Phoenix?
No, that was for a thing called Worcester Magazine.
Okay.
It was a startup, which it was a startup in my hometown. And for 2 years, I was like the only writer they had. So I got to write anything. I got to like an absolute free range. And wow. It was from there that I went to the Phoenix.
It's amazing. Let's talk about the all of the media outlets that are shrinking and becoming obsolete and going away. Let's talk about what's going on with a great magazine you wrote for, Sports Illustrated. What the hell is the story on that?
Well, that's a tragedy. I'm sure that it made. I'm sure it made the same mistakes that early on that every print publication did as regards to the internet. But its demise is completely linked to the moment where Time Inc. sold it, and then it went down a succession of, ridiculous owners, down to, whatever the one is that cleaned house most recently. And that's what's happening. You got private equity goons, destroying small local newspapers, looting them for all they have, and then throwing away eating all the fruit and throwing away the rind. And it's even hitting the LA Times now. I mean, the LA Times was a dreadnought. I remember covering Celtics Lakers playoff games in Los Angeles, and as part of the package at your hotel, they would deliver the LA Times for you every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to drop it outside of my hotel room door, and it would wake me up.
Wow.
It was like somebody dropped a cannonball.
Yeah.
Outside my door.
That much content.
That was all because of the classified real estate ads in and around California, in and around Los Angeles. And once the classified market dried up, that was the beginning of the end of a lot of major newspapers as well.
Yeah, it's sad to see. I remember when I was a kid, young teen, and I would play every sport for a sport for every season. My go-to magazines were Sports Illustrated and Mad Magazine.
There you go. That's some well-rounded self-education there.
I don't think people realized. I don't think our parents realized how subversive Mad Magazine really was.
Oh, I mean, it was everybody's. Just as Sports Illustrated was, a lot of people, including my own, introduction to, stylish writing for magazines. Mad was our introduction to American subversion.
Yeah. I did an interview which hasn't aired yet with Peter Stampfel from the Holy Modal Rounders. A great interview. Talked about the first time he saw Bob Dylan at Gertie's Folk City in 1962 through the window, and he said what really sparked a curiosity and interest in Bob Dylan for Peter Stampfel Peter was a big old folk and blues guy, but when he heard Bob Dylan, here was a young folk and blues guy that was singing those old songs in a rock and roll cadence, and he knew he was, witnessing something that became very great.
Well, that's a very interesting insight, which I've never heard before.
Yeah,
but it certainly points the way to what, to the explosion that came in 1965 and 1966 with Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61, and Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob Dylan was singing rock and roll on a folk guitar, and he just plugged it in.
Yeah. I did a gig several years ago in Ashland, Wisconsin with Spider John Kerner, who was there at 65 when Dylan went electric. And John said, they had all heard the rehearsals. John, who's, one of America's greatest folk singers, absolutely loved it. But he said, the myth about people booing, he said that wasn't really that he wasn't paying attention to, but he did say people were crying, and I figured probably some of it was just from joy, and some was probably revulsion from the old folk art. Of course, the story is that Pete Seeger wanted to take an axe to the cables and cut off the sound system, but I think was wrestled to the ground by Albert Grossman. That's the story I heard. I wish I would have been there.
Well, what always bothered me about that story is Pete had to know that if he went at the cables with an axe, he was going to electrocute himself.
I heard another. I had the pleasure of meeting Pete at the tribute to Woody Guthrie in 1996 in Cleveland, Ohio, and spent.
I'm teasing, of course. He was a great man, and the Hudson River thanked him.
Yeah, in fact, I just saw somebody sent me an article from the Labor newspaper here in Duluth in 1941, and Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger were traveling as the Almanac Singers and actually did a gig in downtown Duluth. It was called the Playmore Ballroom, and I went and I tracked down the address, and I found the building that it was, and I've heard, and then I heard this a related story twice, once from Nora Guthrie and once from Pete Seeger. But they talk about Finlanders, of which I am one, that they're very very non-emotional. In fact, they say the Finlander that loved his wife so much he almost told her. But they played up at a lumber camp, and. Woody was not a bad fiddle player, and Pete's playing guitar and banjo. So they play all night long for all these Finnish lumberjacks, and they're getting ready to pack up and go the next day. And the camp foreman says to Pete, he goes, "Where are you guys going?" And Pete goes, "Well, we played all night last night. We got absolutely no response." And the foreman goes, "What do you mean? They loved you." Hey, speaking of...
How did you manage to avoid that ethnic stoicism?
It was, I came of age in the 70s, man. And
I mean, was there a Norwegian somewhere in your background?
Just a lot of Finns,
I think it's time to go to Ancestry and find out if a Norwegian or a Swede snuck in there early on.
Well, I did have my my nephew gave us all the DNA kits several Christmases ago, and I did find out I have 33% Irish blood.
Really?
Yeah, which explains.
Well, I mean, if that the Vikings were the first people to invade Ireland, so it's entirely possible that long ago a guy with, horns on his helmet and one on his pants, fell in love with a colleen outside Dublin and produced a Mecca.
Well, I wear it all proudly. I played in Reykjavik, Iceland, in 2000. There was a tour that the Minnesota Department of Tourism were doing, and we ended up over there for 4 days. But they say that the oldest genes, when you're studying that stuff, can be found in Iceland. And I remember one night in particular, we were just we had our regular gig at this ballroom at a hotel, and then we set up a few gigs at a few clubs around town. The drinking there it rivals Russia for the amount of alcoholism. In fact, they refer to Iceland as 300,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock. But we'd walk out of these the bars, and there would be lines of cabs because they've got some of the strictest drunk driving laws in the world. And you'd see, the rich ladies with the beautiful black dresses and white pearls stumbling down the street with the homeless. And we were got a bite to eat at one of the food trucks, and there was a woman there I'll never forget. I looked into her eyes, and I swear to God, it was like looking into the eyes of a wolf. It was so stunning. It was like you were looking back hundreds and hundreds of years. Have you ever been to Iceland?
No, I have friends who have been who say it's like the most remarkable place on earth.
It looks like you're on the surface of the moon, and there's a lot. One of the places we played it was built in like 1750, and it's where a lot of the Christian missionaries would set up shop, and they said almost to the man they all ended up going insane. I mean, you can imagine Iceland in 1750 being some sort of missionary proselytizing to whoever the hell was walking the streets and paths back then. But it was really fun. Very progressive place as well.
Yeah, and of course with was the canary in the coal mine in the on the economic catastrophe in 2008.
Yeah.
It was the first place that was the place where a mob hunted one of the bankers down at the opera and threw things at him as he was going into the opera house.
Oh, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I suspect, I suspect as the police reports usually have it, alcohol was involved, but it was righteous anger, so that's okay.
Well, they have and I heard, because I had a couple of musician buddies that had played there before, and they said you're going to encounter a drink called Brennivin, and it's referred to lovingly in Iceland as Black Death. And the only way I could describe it, it's a cross between Jägermeister and turpentine.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, but it packs a punch. It packs a punch. When we were coming back on the plane, about a 7-hour plane ride back to Minneapolis, St. Paul, by then, a few days in, we'd kind of developed a bit of a taste for it. And so we were drinking all the way there and all the way back, and we asked these lovely, gorgeous flight attendants if we could have a little more Brennivin. And right before we got to the airport, she said, "You drank it all." But we did sneak a few of the little bottles, those airport bottles, back for friends.
Carry it on the airlines. They carry it on the airlines too, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't know it was like stuff you made in your backyard.
No, but we did. It's funny you should bring that up, because we met these this blues band, these 4 guys that came down to see us play, and then they invited us to a jam session after the gig was over at about 1 a.m. So we were driving to wherever they rehearsed, and this guy said, "Hey, stop here. I've got to pick something up at my house." So he came out with a full liter bottle of what I thought, oh, that's interesting. Pepsi is clear over here. It's clear liquid. Charlie, it wasn't Pepsi. He had been boiling potatoes on the stove all day. And whatever that concoction was, kicked a bit of a punch, too. We've got Mr. Charles Pierce on the whole show tonight. Checkpoint Charlie on the Wall of Power Radio Hour. Stick around. We got one more set with Charlie coming up.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out a warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out a warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing out a love.
Welcome back to the third set of the Wall and Power Radio Hour. We call these episodes with Charlie Pierce Checkpoint Charlie. Always such a pleasure having Charlie on. Charlie, I was just reading your piece in Esquire recently about this Oklahoma State Senator Nathan Dahm and this Bill 1837, which sounds about as Orwellian as it gets. Tell us about that.
Oh, it's the guy in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to license journalists, which is, the kind of thing that set off the Stamp Act rebellion in Boston, and it ended very badly for George III. So he's actually, and it's not going to go anywhere. This guy is notorious down there for producing ridiculous, laws that nobody votes for. Not even he's a crazy Republican that even crazy Republicans don't go along with. So I'm not concerned about it, but it's just astonishing that someone would even think of it.
Yeah, it's absurd and obscene. Let's talk a little bit about. You've written about a Minnesota boy named Dean Phillips, who actually. I had played Novosibirsk, Russia years ago, and I bumped into Dean before he became a politician. He was a friend of the guy that flew me over. He had a blues and jazz club that I played at, so I got to know Dean a little bit.
Wait a minute! I got a call for a 30-second timeout here. You played Novosibirsk?
Yeah.
Man, you need a better agent.
You know, it was actually phenomenal. It was it's the sister city of St. Paul, and
okay.
But that's not why I was there. My buddy had went to visit his brother in Moscow in the late 80s and found a place that he could buy hockey pucks for a penny. So he filled up about a dozen 55-gallon drums with hockey pucks and brought them back and sold them for like 20 cents a piece to somebody in Minneapolis. And he goes, well, why am I doing hockey pucks when I can do high-end cars? So he started bringing over high-end luxury automobiles like Cadillacs and the like. Was very successful, met a woman who was from Novosibirsk, and he moved there and ended up, he's back in Minneapolis now, but by the end he had like 3 or 4 restaurants and a wood shop, and the state said, hey, you look like you know what you can do and run the theater. But his name was Eric Sjogren, and he was a friend. He went to school with Dean Phillips. But Dean is what's frustrating about Dean. His dad, Eddie Phillips, who was actually, you know that Eddie Phillips was Dear Abby's son, right?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Abigail Van Buren. That is Dean Phillips' grandmother. But Eddie Phillips was a real big R&B and blues aficionado, and actually gave a lot of money to help rebuild the Apollo Theater in Harlem, was very good friends with Al Jarreau. But Dean has been, what the hell was that campaign about? What was he thinking? That's a question, Charlie, to you. What do you think Dean Phillips was thinking?
When he ran for president?
Yeah.
I think he's being a nuisance.
Yeah.
I mean, I think somebody, either he himself or somebody near him, filled his head with the notion that, like, Joe Biden wouldn't survive the campaign.
Right.
And that there would somehow be a Democratic presidential primary. Then he got in, he couldn't get out.
Yeah. Well, and then there was a brief shining moment there where Steve Schmidt, lifelong GOP advocate and Dirty Tricks operative, hooked up with him, and he bailed, I think forever staining what was left of his credibility. But what do you think now, when we're looking at 2024, obviously Trump's going to run to some degree, but what do you think of the Joe Manchins and the Dean Phillips and whoever else might be out there? Do you think there's RFK Jr.? Is there a third-party challenge that's going to?
No, there will never be a third party, an effective third-party challenge in United States politics under our current system.
Okay,
it just won't happen. I don't care how bad things get. First of all, if you're going to have a legitimate third party, you got to run for something besides president.
Yeah.
You got to run for town council. You got to run for state rep. You got to run for the House of Representatives. You can't just say, hey, we've got a third party because we've got this really cool guy we're going to run for president.
Yeah. Well,
and there are just too many. There are too many institutional roadblocks for a successful third. If we didn't, the most successful third-party candidacy in my lifetime was George Wallace.
Right.
And, I don't know that that's a great argument for third party. But, and he didn't even come close.
What, you're a Massachusetts guy. What the hell? When did RFK Jr. go off the tracks?
I don't know. I don't, that's the end of the family I don't know very well. He was that whole clan, all of those kids, Bobby's kids, went off the trolley after he was killed. And David was, a lot of them had drug problems. David had drug problems and, skied into a tree. Bobby was apparently completely unmanageable as a teenager. There were automobile accidents. Their mother Ethel was incapable. There were like 11 of them.
Yeah.
And she was incapable of handling it, and so he was a troubled kid. He got busted for heroin in an airplane bathroom.
Wow.
Years ago. And he straightened himself out, or supposedly did, and got involved in like Pete Seeger, the cleaning up of the Hudson River.
Yeah.
And did a great job. I mean, he could have retired from public life right then and been one of the most famous environmentalists of the late 20th century.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know when, he got hooked into this anti-vax thing, and that flipped the last wheel of the trolley off the rail.
Yeah. Well, getting back, I was going to end that story, but now that you brought up Pete Seeger again, I interviewed Dar Williams, a great folk singer from New England, a couple years ago on the radio show. And she lived in Hudson Valley, right up the road from Pete Seeger. And she told me one day she walked into the local hardware store and saw Pete Seeger buying a hammer.
Tell me she said it.
Well, it's just the image. I mean, come on. You only get one of those in your lifetime.
Oh,
so
man, I did. That's funny. I know Dar. I've seen Dar in concert up here.
She's great.
She's a real union buster. Not a union buster, but a union supporter.
Yeah. See,
in fact, I saw a video of her and Billy Bragg at some Woody Guthrie tribute show where they all sang Union Maid.
Yeah. Well, Billy Bragg, he's one of my heroes, and I opened his very first show at 7th Street Entry in Minneapolis back in 1984, and kind of been friends with him ever since. He's wrote a great book on the history of skiffle, which I'm still kind of going through when I'm reading my 6 other books. Say, we just got a minute or two left with Mr. Charlie Pierce. Let's talk about the team I'm putting my money on for the Super Bowl, the team I call Taylor's team. I just call him Taylor's team.
This is a great Super Bowl for making people's heads explode. You've got the team You've got the team representing the gayest city in America against Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. And because the way sports television works, this is going to be a Taylor-a-thon through that whole game. And she's got a gig in Tokyo the night before.
Wow.
She's got to fly back from Tokyo to Las Vegas. And Tokyo to Las Vegas is probably a shuttle. But, to get to the game.
Somebody posited on social media a few weeks ago the perfect halftime show for this year's Super Bowl would be Taylor Swift performing with Jason Kelce dancing shirtless.
No, that's his brother. His brother does the shirtless dancing.
Yeah. No. That's what I'm saying. His brother did. Yeah. Well, then
his brother's up there. His brother's up there in Buffalo, in January with no shirt on, slamming those Jenny Creams.
Charlie
I got to
Pierce.
tell you, I've got a new musical enthusiasm.
Who's that? What's that?
Well, I actually, once again, I'm probably at least 5 years late on this person. It's a woman named Ashley McBryde.
Oh, I've heard her name. What to tell us about her?
She's got a wonderful song called "Gospel Night at the Strip Club." she's kind of a one woman, semi folky drive-by truckers.
They're beautiful.
He sings
I love
about
Little Red.
those parts of the South where there aren't any magnolias growing.
I will Ashley McBride. I am checking her out. Charlie Pierce, can we get a promise to do this monthly through 2024? Because my head will
absolutely.
explode.
Give me some, a heads up, and we can do
Great.
this once a month. Sure, absolutely.
That'd be great, because my head is going to explode if I can't talk to guys like you that are smarter than me, that know what the hell's going on. But like I said, we've had Charlie Pierce on for the whole show. I refer to him as my psychological morphine drip for all things political. Charlie, you have a great weekend, my brother, and look forward to seeing you in person. One more quick thing. I just talked to a friend of mine named Keith Sicola, Native American songwriter. He just submitted he's got a couple tunes. There's a new documentary coming out on Henry Boucher. I think it's called The Electric Indian, and it might be being produced by PBS.
I've heard, I hate to say it this way. I've heard the drums beating on that one because, as we know, Henry recently passed.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for if it's really going to be on PBS. I'm dying to see it.
I'll talk to Keith, and I will keep you posted on all the above. Charlie, thanks so much for being on the Wall and Power Radio Hour. Checkpoint Charlie. Check it out monthly here on AM 950. Thanks, brother. Have a great night.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Take care.
It's gospel night at the strip club. I've been sleeping in my car. I lead the singing service with a half-assed tuned guitar. Brandy's singing backup while Lonnie's tending bar. Just waiting for more sinners to show up. Crystal just started dancing. She's always right on point. She don't mind if you don't tip her, as long as you slip her a joint. And Patty's got an upper to get her through her shift.
Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show was produced by Paul Metza, engineered by the great Patrick Lilia. We'd like to thank our guest, Checkpoint Charlie Pierce. He's promised to be on once a month now during this tumultuous 2024 election season. You can find more about me at paulmetza.com. If you get up to Duluth, I play at the Blackwater Lounge every Wednesday from 6 to 8 in downtown Duluth. And like my dad used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy.